We gather today with sacred intention to declare that justice is our prayer. We affirm in covenant with the beloved community that is possible. The seeds have been planted time and again, and we remember all those who went before us, who made beloved community a dream that might someday be realized. Justice is our prayer. May our time of worship together continue to water the budding trees of our diverse interdependence. May our time of worship give air and nourishment to the parts of the collective spirit that need to grow and thrive, that embrace equity as a known way of living. Justice is our prayer. We affirm in covenant with the beloved community that is possible. May it be so. Let us worship together. Those words by Rebecca Savage. I would invite you to rise in body or spirit. The soul singers are going to lead us in singing When the Spirit Says Do, which we had a lot of fun with. Joy with it earlier in the year. Let's try it again, and then remain standing if it's comfortable for you through the chalice lighting and the doxology.
If you'll get out your purple word sheet, it's rather overkill on my part, but I kept forgetting what word to insert. So I wrote it all out, so you just follow down, and it might be easier than using your hymnal.
Would our chalice lighters come forward, please, and light the flame and lead us in the words for lighting the chalice.
Let this flame be a symbol of the wholeness we seek.
Its brightness dispelling gloom, lighting a path to faith and hope.
Its glowing reminding us of the sacred bonds that link us to all living things.
Its radiance calling us to cast the light of freedom, justice, and peace on all the world. Please be seated. Good morning and welcome. I am the Reverend Susan Milner, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. It is my honor and my pleasure to serve as interim minister to this historic congregation committed to a more just and compassionate world in the present and in the future. We gratefully acknowledge the Patuxet Wampanoag people on whose ancestral lands we gather today. We commit to support and honor their history and culture. Welcome warmly to all of you members and friends, newcomers, visitors. Welcome to those of you here in our historic meeting house, and also to those of you who are joining us online. We're so glad to have you in any way that you can attend. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey of the Spirit, whatever your age, younger or older or in between, for this 1 hour, we embrace you as part of this congregation and want you to feel like it belongs to you, at least just a little. Everyone is invited to coffee hour following the service. It is through the store, through the parlor, and down at the end of that wing of the building. If you're visiting today, if you're new, and if you take a red mug when you get your coffee or tea, that will let us recognize you and give you a warm First Parish greeting. I have one announcement. We have two sort of continuing ed, adult religious education, faith formation kinds of things happening after church at 11:30. The Reverend Tom Shade's going to be leading the first of a 4-part series in the history of Unitarian Universalism since World War II, and it looks fascinating. You had a chance to pre-register, but you don't have to be pre-registered. Feel free to go ahead and go downstairs to the chapel, I think, and attend. And even if you can't attend all sessions, you're welcome. We are also, there's an outing of the nature group today who will be outside at the picnic tables at 12:30. It starts, no, wait a minute. It starts earlier, but if you're taking Reverend Tom's class, you can go from there at 12:30 to the nature group and join a little late. They will be at the picnic tables building pine cone feeders. You'll have time to make and hang a bird feeder and participate in forest bathing. And at 1:30, there are going to be refreshments inside. So it sounds like a really interesting experience, and isn't it great that we have so much going on today? So, again, welcome, and it's just good to be here on this weekend of all weekends. If somebody will give us a start, we'll sing our children out and let them go downstairs for their worship and their program. I'm happy to be joined in the pulpit this morning by Caroline Mitchell, who is one of the members of our worship and music committee. Caroline is going to be doing a reading by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. because it is, of course, the weekend when we celebrate his birthday. This is the letter from Birmingham jail, an excerpt from it that we edited just a bit this morning because we thought it might have been, the excerpt we had might have been a bit too long. But I will be saying much more about this in today's sermon.
While confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling our present activities unwise and untimely. Birmingham is probably the most thoroughly segregated city in the United States. Its ugly record of police brutality is widely known. Its unjust treatment of Negroes in the courts is a notorious reality. There have been more unsolved bombings of Negro homes and churches in Birmingham than in any other city in this nation. These are the hard, brutal facts of the case. On the basis of these conditions, Negro leaders sought to negotiate with the city fathers, but the latter consistently refused to engage in good faith negotiation. Then last September came the opportunity to talk with the leaders of Birmingham's economic community. In the course of the negotiations, certain promises were made by the merchants. For example, the promise to remove the store's humiliating racial signs. On the basis of these promises, the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth and the leaders of the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights agreed to call a moratorium on all demonstrations. As the weeks and months went by, we realized that we were the victims of a broken promise. The signs remained. And in so many experiences in the past, our hopes had been blasted and our disappointment was keenly felt. We have waited for more than 340 years for our constitutional and God-given rights. The nations of Asia and Africa are moving with jet-like speed toward gaining political independence, but we still creep at horse and buggy pace toward the gaining of a cup of coffee at a lunch counter. Perhaps it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait. But when you have seen vicious mob lynch your mothers and fathers at will, and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and even kill your Black brothers and sisters with impunity, when you see the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering, as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky, and see her beginning to distort her personality by unconsciously developing a bitterness toward white people. When you have to concoct an answer for a 5-year-old son asking, "Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean?" When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you. When you are humiliated day in and day out by nagging signs reading white and colored. When you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness. Then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over and men are no longer willing to be plunged into an abyss of injustice, where they experience the bleakness of corroding despair. I hope, sirs, you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience.
Would you join, please, in a spirit of prayer and meditation? Join in a spirit of intention toward justice. Spirit of life and love, spirit of justice. God who befriends those who stand upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone. We are grateful to be together this morning. We gather especially to remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but not only him, for there were thousands of unnamed people who put their bodies and lives on the line so that all may be free. And yet, freedom comes at a cost. And we know that racism and homophobia, ageism and ableism, sexism and classism, all of these often unacknowledged realities prevent us from fully knowing one another, from creating the beloved community spoken of by prophets and ordinary persons alike. May the work of Dr. King continue to eradicate injustice wherever and whenever we encounter it. May we continue to speak out against injustice, to speak even if we are afraid our words will not be heard or welcomed. May the spirit of Dr. King continue to flow through our daily living. May we have the courage of Dr. King as we continue to stand up for justice, reconciliation, and truth, despite challenge and controversy. Dr. King went to the mountaintop. He saw the promised land, and he reassured us we will get there one day. May that be no paradisal dream, but a reality in our own time. Let us enter into a time of silence in which we hold our own intentions toward justice, in which we say a prayer for the ongoing work to which Dr. King called us, and perhaps on this day, a prayer for our democracy. Let us enter into the silence. May our hopes and dreams take flight on the wings of love. The words of this morning's prayer were written by the Reverend Kathleen Rowlands. And now let me invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing number 1018, which is in the teal blue hymnal, Come and Go With Me. And we're going to get some help on that one too, right? I try to make this moment of offering in our community also a moment of appreciation. And let me just say how much I appreciate that all of you are out on here, they have come here to your spiritual and religious home on a weekend at a time when the weather's up and down, although gorgeous today, but also our spirits are up and down, so much happening in the world, so much of concern. There's no greater commitment than I would ask of you today than your ongoing commitment from this day to justice, to equity, to racial justice, as well as all the other kinds of justice that we care so much about. And it is part of the mission of this church through the ministries of our church to remain committed to that justice. So we appreciate it, all of the support you give to those efforts, and as well to that you give of your resources to the congregation. The morning offering will now be gratefully accepted. second reading for today is from the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of people to alter or abolish it. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for the future security. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war and peace, friends. Many of you remember the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom on August 28th of 1963. Even if you were not born, you have almost surely heard the recordings or seen them of Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, "I Have a Dream," delivered at the Lincoln Memorial, calling for an end to racial discrimination and the enactment of civil rights legislation, which would follow within the next couple of years. The legislation. Like the shot fired in Lexington, Massachusetts, 186 years earlier, his words were heard around the world and define the most important American dream of all, freedom, and freedom in hand with equity. It's a wonderful speech meant to inspire the crowd of 250,000 there on the Mall and those many more listening elsewhere, to inspire us to act on the highest ideals that we hold in common. It moved people. It extended their spirits. It even allowed many to be glad after so many ugly sights of racism that our country could hold such a dream, that we could be propelled by it toward a future of greater justice. And now, 62 years later, with the Civil Rights Act stripped to bare bones, and affirmative action struck down by the Supreme Court, with open racism granted new permission in the public square, and as we face an administration that could wreck dreams or democracy itself, you may be wondering, as often as I am, how it could happen, and I don't have a good answer for that. More perniciously, though, many of us are urged to whisper, whether to ourselves or others, well, maybe we went too far. Maybe we should retrench. Maybe we should wait. Maybe we should hold back. And I'm not judging. We are afraid. We've been shocked by just how ready a voting majority of Americans are to turn progress back and remove precious rights from individuals and groups of people. And it's all blanketed under a contemptuous branding of the concern for justice and the awareness of justice as being woke. But we might ask, when did it become better to sleep through our lives together like moral Rip Van Winkles, determined not to know or care or do better for each other? So in this year of all years, let us determine to follow the dream. Let us commit as people of this Unitarian Universalist faith to pursue unapologetically the values that can know no compromise: equality, equity, dignity, compassion, justice. Let us embrace the storyline of a religious tradition, ours, that has been willing through many struggles and many bad moments, but at its best, to fight for the freedom of all, because in the end, commitment to freedom is inseparable from our belief, in Emerson's words, of the divine spark in each human being, and a centuries-old conviction of the Universalist that each person is a child of God. It's inseparable. The commitment to freedom and equity is not our politics. It is our theology and it is our morality. On this weekend, as we make that commitment, I suggest that as beautiful and inspiring as the speech "I Have a Dream" is, and as a preacher, I envy it. It was not the most important thing Martin Luther King Jr. wrote. The piece that stands as a pivotal chapter in the American story of growing freedom is the letter from Birmingham jail, written 4 months earlier in April of 1963. It lays out the freedom that Americans have had to fight for over and over, different Americans, and it also reveals the strain of American character that fights against freedom again and again. Whether for or against, America has a lot of freedom fighters at our core, and unless we understand that central tension of for and against, we risk our ability to shape the future of the story as we dream of it. The story of freedom fighting is captured in the 2 documents we read from this morning, parallel in strategy, but coming off the pens of men in very different social and moral contexts, the letter from Birmingham jail and the Declaration of Independence. Think about it. When Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, he and his compatriots were perched on the edge of a dangerous undertaking for their own freedom, to separate from one of the wealthiest empirical powers in the world and to found a new nation. To them, the future was full of possibilities they had barely begun to imagine. And as he wrote, he surely knew that he was heralding a war. But you know what? He also knew that he was among the elite of the colonial comrades, educated, landholding, and very sadly, slaveholding, admired here and abroad as a man of the Enlightenment. He lived in privilege, and he knew that his declaration would be greeted with open minds and open arms, at least by many surrounding him in Philadelphia that spring. The context of the letter from Birmingham jail was very different. As King indicated in what Caroline read, Birmingham was known for extreme racial discrimination, but also for resistance to that racism. By spring of 1963, students from Miles College had boycotted downtown stores, and in a meeting, civic leaders agreed to desegregate 40% of water fountains. Another white organization agreed to remove whites-only signs from their businesses. These seem like pathetically small concessions to us today because times have changed. But at the time, they sparked outrage. And who knows what threats were thrown around or when the business and civic leaders decided they had gone too far, that they needed to wait. But they quickly backtracked and failed to keep the promises. King, who believed that the oppressed have to demand freedom from the oppressors, began a campaign of nonviolent protest marches and sit-ins. And a district court, responded by criminalizing all protest and related activities. And so along with Ralph Abernathy and others from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Martin Luther King was arrested and jailed on Good Friday, a day transforming prophets seem to reap their punishment. Unlike Jefferson, King had become a symbol of threat to the powerful in the city of Birmingham. And rather than being admired for his accomplishments, he was resented. And then in jail, somebody gave King a newspaper, and he read a letter published there from 8 white Alabama clergymen, attacking his actions, demanding that he pull back religious leaders. Using scraps of paper supplied by a Black employee, King wrote a response to the newspaper that had published the letter from Birmingham jail. And in some ways, you know, I just grew fascinated this week with the fact that it approaches the issues in some ways as the Declaration of Independence did. Think about it. In the Declaration, Jefferson talks about the long train of abuses that the colonists had experienced at the hands of the British, and all their attempts to make peaceful avenues to correction. We have petitioned for redress, he said. We've warned them, we've appealed to their native justice to no effect. And that's not unlike what King does when he writes of the abuse and denial Black Americans, especially Black children, have suffered from the beginning of the country's storyline. And the fact that he and others in Birmingham have negotiated, they've met, they've accepted compromises, and then they had all their hopes blasted. For both men, the point came when there was no choice but to act. Because their petitions had been rejected, Jefferson said, we have to consider them enemies. And King declares that there comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of injustice where they experience the bleakness of corroding despair. I hope, sirs, you understand our legitimate impatience. What a story, America, history is. Taken together, those two documents reveal the conflict at the center of our storyline, the fight for freedom by those who don't have it, and the fight against freedom by those who want to hold on to it for themselves alone. And much of the agony of America grows exactly out of this narrative. Yet it is also alive with the dreams and the possibilities and the energy and the insistence to expand those freedoms. Here's the critical irony. The Declaration of Independence, locked into textbooks, is considered a courageous statement by a people who had been pushed too far, considered that way by Americans. And King's letter, still resonating in its resonant in its ringing indictment of racism, which many are trying to bleach out of our history today, would probably be seen as radical if very many people actually read it word for word. Too far. Just wait. Not now. Too woke. Living now in a time of backlash to civil rights and the New Deal, the women's movement, marriage equality, the expansion of freedoms, we ask, what will the story of America become in months and years and decades ahead? Will we hold on to that dream of freedom and expanding it and including and including and including? Or will it be lost? We don't know. And there are factors like artificial intelligence and mass information that the tides of our history have not had to account for. But this is sure. How that story goes depends in part on us, every one of us. King himself said it, change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. We don't know who the next prophet will be or what form the prophecy will take. Maybe it won't come in one person, but then it never did. Without the Black women who nurtured families and held communities together and taught them the dream quietly, without the men in Black churches planning and strategizing Martin Luther King Jr., the prophecy would not have happened, and the dream would not have sounded in distant lands. And so, however tired we are, my friends, let us take courage on this Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. We are called by Dr. King's legacy to do our part, to write a story headed toward greater freedom. There can be no deep disappointment where there is not deep love, King wrote from Birmingham jail. I believe that. But I believe that the love King called us to was not love just for himself, though love him, many of us do, but the love for the freedom that every human being deserves. Love that freedom deeply enough not to fall silent, I beg you. Love it tenderly enough to nurture it with others. Love it fiercely enough to insist on it. And love it boldly enough to keep it in the public square. Small and insignificant though we may be, if we keep faith in a next wave of freedom that will come to guide hungry souls on the path to a better world, it can be so. There is no time to waste. There is no time to wait. The time is now. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 148 in the Gray Book. This one was Ed's request, Let Freedom Span Both East and West. our chalice lighters, please come forward to extinguish the flame. And join me, if you would, please, in the words for extinguishing the chalice in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. These words by John Johnstone. We shall overcome when we can truly celebrate the diversity of contributions and talents offered by all people. We shall overcome hatred and prejudice and oppression. When we can truly extend our hands to one another in loving acceptance, we shall overcome the past that haunts us now. Living in peace and freedom, we shall overcome the wrongs that have happened and the debts left unpaid. Let us join together in that commitment to overcome. Let us together say, Amen.